I ran for office statewide, and I was often asked my position on the death penalty, and my position is that I am in favor of capital of the death penalty in New Mexico, and I've always been consistent on that. I just think there are some crimes that are so heinous, that do so much damage, that the death penalty is an appropriate penalty.
I think that the United States is one of the very few countries left in this world that still executes its citizens. They no longer do it in South Africa. They no longer do it in Nicaragua. We're left with a few nations on this earth. I think we're in the company of Iraq, Kuwait, a few countries in Africa.
Last year, Texas ranked #1 in sentencing people to death and actually executing. Last year, 39 people were executed in Texas, which ranks it as the #1 in the country.
I'm not happy, though, that the governor is sending our officials to Texas that have 443 people on death row, and I think kill people at a higher rate than any other state, to learn how to do it. The ACLU works to support and make sure that civil rights are, maintained in the United States. And the 8th Amendment says that there will not be cruel and unusual punishment by the government against the people. And so from our perspective, the death penalty is the ultimate violation of the 8th Amendment.
If you recall the circumstances of the Terry Clark case, he had been out on bond, on appeal on his conviction for kidnapping and first-degree sexual penetration of a 6-year-old girl. While he was out on bond for that horrible crime, he picked up a 9-year-old girl, a little girl named Dina Lynn Gore, from her home in Artesia. He drove her to his brother's ranch where he raped her, he shot her in the head 3 times, and he buried her in a shallow grave. The facts were terrible. The effect on this family have been devastating.
I heard that Terry Clark was saying that he wanted to waive his appeals and be executed, and I also understood that his relationship with his prior lawyer had broken down. I understood that he was frustrated with lawyers that he perceived were trying to block his wishes. And I wrote to him, and we exchanged some letters, and then I agreed to represent him, always with the understanding that I'm against the death penalty, and that I hoped that he wouldn't be executed. But also with the understanding that I ultimately think it's his decision, and that I wouldn't block him if he chose to take this course. I think that the way we create a society that is not violent is by starting at the beginning with our children. And I think that in terms of, once a horrible crime is being committed, if that person needs to be removed from the street in order to protect society from that person committing another horrible crime, then so be it. That should happen. But I think that in terms of deterrence, by the time the crime is being committed, it's too late, and we really need to start at the beginning. And I'm sure that's how most people think, I would hope. And the question is, how do you do that? And that's a very difficult question, but certainly the current war on crimes is not an answer. We're just locking more and more people up for a longer and longer time, building more and more prisons. And it's obviously not working in terms of making this a safe place to live.
Yeah, I do think that person should contemplate what they've done. And I would rather see them alive and have our country have some kind of basis for human rights and civil rights.
I don't necessarily think it's a deterrent, but I still think that it's appropriate in some cases.
In my opinion, the death sentence is never appropriate, and that A sentence of life imprisonment is a sentence that should be imposed on people who commit the worst crimes.
You know, Tony Anaya, when he lifted all of those death penalty sentences, I think did a wonderful thing. I mean, in my mind, the death penalty is an erratic, hypocritical form of supposed criminal justice that hurts nearly everyone involved.
To me, the death penalty is premeditated, deliberate, intentional murder committed by the state in the name of its citizens.
We're not defending the people that are committing crimes. You know, we're saying the death penalty is wrong. The victim did not deserve to die. So we're never saying this person deserves to live over your loved one. Your loved one should not have died. I think that pain and vengeance are natural reactions, but in the end aren't really part of the healing process. I've never heard anyone say that.
He wakes up sometime early in the morning. He sleeps on a cement slab with a thin mattress on the top of it, and breakfast is stuck in through a little sort of cubby hole. The breakfast is slid in, so he eats in his cell by himself. He can take a shower in the day, and the way that happens is he sticks his hands out through that little cubby hole and is cuffed, and then the door is slid open, and he's escorted by a guard cuffed to the shower. When he gets into the locked shower area, he sticks his hands back out and he's uncuffed, can take the shower, is recuffed before he exits the shower and escorted back to his cell, where again he sticks his hands back out of the hole and has the cuffs taken off. Lunch is served again through the slot in the door, and later in the day dinner is served through the slot in the door. And there's no sort of ability to just hang out with other inmates. In the past, even people who were in this sort of maximum security could sit down with other inmates who are in maximum security in a small group and talk or play cards, but that's all ended. And so someone really is truly alone.
Of course he could contemplate what he's done. It's certainly possible. And maybe he should have to. I guess one of the problems with this issue is that it's so complicated and it's so emotional, and these are issues, life and death and fear and for some people God and family, you know, and pain. These aren't things that you can't talk about them in sound bites. I don't think there's any black or white answer to these questions, which why it's so hard for people to think about it, but people understand that impulse of vengeance. People understand what would it feel like if someone in my family was murdered that way. And then I think the thinking stops.
I think Terry Clark is a good man. I think he's a generous person. He's a giving person. He has a deep faith in God, who is a forgiving God. I think people that speak of him as an evil person simply don't know him. I think people who have come to know Terry over the years, meaning people involved in the prison fellowship program who are Christians who go in to speak to inmates, they consider Terry a good friend.
In the healing process, I think most religious leaders or most spiritual guides would tell you that eventually forgiveness is the only way to have reprieve from that pain. That's something I'm always hearing, and I've heard that from victims' families, that it was the forgiveness that brought them peace again, not the vengeance. Vengeance is a painful, painful thing to feel. And so this process prolongs that vengeance and that pain, and think of every time that they have to go and advocate and talk about that crime again.
Terry has expressed great remorse for what happened with Dina Lindgore. And I think that has been made clear in the past as well.
I guess I don't believe in an eye for an eye. To me, that's not justice. So it's possible that the family and I would just not agree morally on that case. I don't think there's anything I could say any statistics, even if they were absolutely true, that would make their pain go away. And I think that's one of the points against the death penalty, is that I honestly don't believe that killing someone is going to make their pain go away or in any way bring justice to their lives, because justice is that the crime never happened in the first place.
One of the biggest tragedies about this is that I think the victims' families really look to an execution and have been taught that somehow they're going to feel better when, for instance, Terry Clark is executed. And I don't think anything can make them feel better. And I fear that they're going to have a terrible letdown when they find, or if they find, that Terry Clark has been executed and they still carry the same pain that they have carried now for all these years. So no, I don't think there are any winners.
I guess that just doesn't make any sense to me, to say that killing someone is professional and dignified. It's not gentle, even if he's asleep.
I don't think there's any way to commit murder in a dignified way or in a professional way. And I think if that's how they're trying to live with themselves, then that's what they need to do, and I'll give them that. They have a hard job to commit murder. I find it difficult to separate the acts of the state from the acts of our clients who have committed murder.
What they've done frightens me, sickens me, and at the same time, I don't think they should die.